You belonged to my brother, and now you are stuck with me.
Does your majesty think I chose to be handed over like this?
Why do you hide your face? What is under that veil?
Yusuf al-Ramad watched the royal signet ring on his finger with an overwhelming and suffocating sense of unreality that had not lessened even slightly in the entire 2 months since the forced and completely unwanted coronation. The heavy, cold gold felt strange, wrong, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. Because it did. It should be on the finger of Tariq, his older brother, the firstborn groomed meticulously since birth to rule with wisdom and firmness. Not on Yusuf, the second son who had spent his entire life gloriously free of the crushing responsibility of the throne, passionately studying architecture in Europe, planning to build elegant bridges and modern hospitals instead of governing an entire kingdom with millions of subjects dependent on every decision. But Tariq had died in a brutal helicopter accident exactly 63 endless days ago. And with his devastating death, absolutely everything had changed irreversibly and forever. The overwhelming weight of the golden crown was only a small part of the unbearable burden, because along with the throne came suffocating obligations that Yusuf had never freely chosen, never remotely desired, never imagined having to honor in any way. And the most significant and terrifying one was scheduled to arrive at the palace in less than 1 agonizing hour. Samira al-Zahir, the promised bride. The mysterious woman who should have married Tariq as an essential part of an absolutely crucial peace treaty between 2 historically tense and distrustful kingdoms. The woman who now, by unbreakable tradition and desperate political necessity, would be forced to marry Yusuf instead of the man she had actually chosen. A woman whose face he had never once seen. Samira followed an ancient and rigorous tradition from her conservative home kingdom, remaining completely veiled in the presence of any man who was not direct blood family. The impenetrable black silk veil covered her entire face completely, from forehead to neck, leaving only her eyes visible through a narrow opening elaborately embroidered in pure gold. During endless months of complicated diplomatic negotiations that preceded Tariq's political engagement, she had always appeared this way. Silent and deeply mysterious presence, reduced to a pair of dark eyes observing everything with disturbing and indecipherable intensity. Yusuf vaguely and uninterestedly recalled seeing her once during a formal diplomatic visit a year ago, when Tariq was still alive and the world made complete and comforting sense. She stood beside her authoritarian father, posture perfectly upright and rigid, delicate hands covered by lace gloves, gracefully clasped in front of her motionless body. Tariq had commented casually that the tradition was antiquated and unnecessary, but politically required to maintain a fragile alliance. Yusuf had absently agreed and been uninterested, far more concerned with the fascinating architectural blueprints he obsessively studied than with his older brother's complicated marital politics. He had never imagined, even in his darkest nightmares, that this veiled and mysterious woman would become his permanent and inevitable responsibility. The massive office door opened heavily, and Rashid, his loyal chief advisor since Tariq's prosperous days, entered with a grave and troubled expression that had become permanent and fixed since the terrible accident. "Princess Samira's motorcade has been sighted on the roads," he announced formally and carefully. "She will arrive in exactly 40 minutes. Your Majesty." Yusuf deeply hated the pompous title. He hated how formal and cold it sounded, and how utterly foreign to who he truly was deep down. "And the protocol formalities?" he asked tiredly, massaging his aching temples where a headache beat persistent and cruel. "Everything meticulously prepared according to the ancient rigid protocol," Rashid confirmed with professional efficiency. "There will be an elaborate formal reception in the Corral, Grand Hall. She will be comfortably installed in the East Wing according to the sacred tradition, separate and distant apartments until the official wedding in 3 months. During that delicate period, rigorously supervised meetings, weekly formal dinners, absolutely necessary public events for appearances. 3 endless months. 90 torturous days of forced and artificial cohabitation with a woman he had not freely chosen, did not minimally know, and whose face would remain an absolute mystery until literally the moment of the solemn vows in the sacred venue. "What if I cancel completely?" Yusef asked without real hope, though he already knew the inevitable answer perfectly. The peace treaty between our kingdoms would collapse immediately and catastrophically, Rashid said, without diplomatic pretense, as he always did with brutal honesty. Without the symbolically crucial marital alliance, the deep, ancient tensions would resurface violently. Potentially bloody war in a matter of short months. Thousands of innocents would die unnecessarily. So, no real choice whatsoever, like everything in his life now. There is one delicate thing more, Rashid added hesitantly and uncomfortably. Lady Soraya requested an urgent audience this morning. 3 insistent times. Yusef closed his weary eyes, a new wave of emotional complication joining the internal chaos. Soraya. His beautiful ex-girlfriend, the woman he had genuinely and deeply loved before Tariq's sudden death, transformed absolutely everything beyond recognition. They had officially broken up weeks ago when it became painfully clear that he would need to honor his dead brother's diplomatic engagement. She had accepted at the time with dignity, or at least pretended to accept gracefully. But recently she had begun to reappear insistently, first with transparent diplomatic excuses, then with increasingly desperate and embarrassing pleas. "Tell her firmly that I am unavailable," Yusef ordered with a steel voice, "indefinitely. With all due respect, Your Majesty." She is very persistent and determined. Perhaps one final, definitive conversation? No. Yusef cut him off decisively. There is absolutely nothing left to say. Soraya needs to move on with dignity, and I need to do what I inevitably must. Even if it meant burying any chance of true love marriage. Even if it meant spending his entire life next to a woman who was a complete and permanent stranger. When Samira finally arrived punctually, her entrance was a carefully orchestrated and elaborate event that Yusef observed from the golden, uncomfortable throne with a controlled, neutral expression he had practiced painfully for weeks. The hall was crowded and suffocating with important dignitaries, nervous advisors, curious court members, all intensely curious, all silently judging, all watching closely to see how the new, inexperienced young king would handle this unexpected and heavy responsibility. She walked in slowly, rigidly flanked by 2 imposing guards from her home kingdom, and an older, severe female attendant. The impenetrable black silk veil completely covered her face exactly as he vaguely remembered. But this time she was much closer physically, and for the first time, he truly looked with focused attention. Her eyes were utterly mesmerizing. They were dark as a moonless night, deep and unfathomable, artistically lined with traditional kohl that made them appear even larger and dramatically expressive. Almond-shaped and perfect, with long dark lashes that cast delicate shadows when she blinked slowly. And in that suspended moment, as she walked slowly and gracefully down the antique carpeted corridor, those eyes met his across the considerable distance. Yusef felt something entirely strange and unexpected in his oppressed chest. Not attraction exactly. How could he feel physical attraction for a face he could not see at all? But something indefinable. Intense curiosity, perhaps. Or instant recognition of a sharp intelligence that shone visibly in that penetrating gaze. She was carefully assessing him as much as he was assessing her. And there was a subtle but unmistakable challenge in the way she held her gaze steady without meekly diverting it as women normally did. When she reached the base of the elevated throne, she bowed in a deep, graceful curtsy that bespoke years of training. Her voice, when she finally spoke clearly, was soft but surprisingly crisp and firm, carrying through the entire hall without perceptible difficulty. "Your Majesty, it is a profound honor to be in your royal presence. I accept with genuine humility the responsibility that cruel fate has placed upon us both equally." The words were formal, appropriate, diplomatically expected, but there was something in the controlled tone, a slight intentional emphasis on us both, a subtle recognition that the situation was a prison for him as much as it was inevitably for her. "Princess Samira," Yusef replied stiffly, hating how cold and distant his voice sounded. "Welcome to the palace. I sincerely hope you find comfort here." A polite, hollow lie that both immediately recognized as such. The formal reception continued at a torturous pace that felt like a suffocating eternity. Youssef had to sit rigidly in the uncomfortable golden throne, accepting endless congratulations, while Samira was efficiently installed somewhere distant in the East Wing. Only when it was finally all over, exhaustive hours later, was he able to retreat thankfully to his private chambers. He found an expensive bottle of scotch waiting on the bar, a thoughtful gift from Rashid, who perfectly knew the signs of extreme stress. He poured himself a generous measure and went out onto the wide balcony, looking out at the gardens softly illuminated by the full moon. "You look awfully unhappy for someone who just met his future wife." Youssef turned quickly and defensively. Soraya was leaning casually in the balcony doorway, her provocative red dress hugging curves he knew so well intimately. Her dark, glossy hair fell in perfect waves over her bare, tanned shoulders. Her scarlet-painted lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. "How the hell did you get in here?" he demanded angrily, the annoyance mixing dangerously with the emotional exhaustion. "I have loyal friends in the palace," she said vaguely and mysteriously, walking in uninvited and unpermitted. "Friends who clearly remember when I was almost queen. When you genuinely loved me." "Soraya," he began tensely, a clear warning in his voice. "She's ugly. You know that perfectly well," Soraya interrupted casually and cruelly, taking the glass of scotch from his hands and drinking slowly. "That's exactly why the veil. I've heard terrible rumors. A horrible birth defect. A terrible burn that completely disfigured her. Something so awful her family has hidden her since childhood." "They are just malicious, unfounded rumors," Youssef countered defensively. But he felt a growing, disturbing discomfort. Because he had secretly thought it himself. Why else would someone cover up so completely always? "Are they?" Soraya challenged calculatingly, stepping closer dangerously, her familiar, seductive perfume invading his senses. "Or is that exactly why they are so easily agreeing to the arranged marriage? No normal man would choose her if he saw what is beneath that veil. But you don't have a real choice, do you? Trapped by a stupid treaty." "Enough now," Youssef said with increasing firmness, stepping physically away. "You need to leave immediately. It is not appropriate for you to be here." "It's not appropriate," she repeated bitterly and sarcastically. "As if anything about this situation is appropriate. We should be together happily, Youssef. You loved me deeply. You still love me, I know you do. You can't just turn off feelings because you inherited a throne." "I can, and I have," he lied transparently, meeting her eyes with a determination he didn't entirely feel. "Soraya, you are part of the dead past. Samira is my inevitable future, whether I like it or not. And you making this more difficult helps no one." Something ugly and dangerous flashed across her beautiful face. "We shall see how long you maintain that noble loyalty when you realize what you are truly trapped with." She left quickly before he could respond, leaving only a lingering perfume and poisonous doubts that began to root deep in his weary mind. The first few days of compulsory cohabitation with Samira were a painful exercise in suffocating formality. Weekly dinners, where they conversed politely about politics and the weather, while 20 servants watched every minute move. Walks in the gardens with discreet but constant watchful escorts. Public events where they had to feign mutual interest for hungry cameras. Youssef treated her with rigid politeness and cold, calculated distance. He complied with the minimum required protocol, absolutely nothing more. Because every time he looked at her, at that frustrating veil that hid everything, he felt a growing, unbearable frustration. He didn't know if he was conversing with a beautiful woman or with someone entirely different from what she appeared. He couldn't read facial expressions, see smiles or frowns, connect emotionally the way normal humans naturally did. It was like trying to get to know an invisible ghost. And worse, the doubts Soraya had planted grew like poisonous weeds. He found himself observing Samira obsessively, looking for telltale clues. The precise way her hands always remained covered by elegant gloves. How she never ate or drank in his presence, citing religious custom. How her voice, though clear, had a strangely controlled quality, as if she took extreme care with every word. What was she hiding? But then, 3 weeks after her arrival, something completely changed. Youssef was in the office struggling with a frustrating diplomatic stalemate, a trade dispute between two allied kingdoms that threatened dangerous escalation. Advisors offered solutions that would only worsen the situation. He was about to explode with frustration when a gentle knock on the door interrupted. "Majesty," the servant announced carefully. "Princess Samira requests permission to enter. She says she may be able to help with the diplomatic matter." Youssef almost automatically refused, but an unexpected curiosity overcame him. Aloud. Samira entered with the dignified posture he had begun to recognize, the black veil contrasting drastically with the office's golden decor. She stopped a respectful distance away, her gloved hands clasped in front. "Pardon the intrusion. Your Majesty," she began, her voice formal yet firm. "I inadvertently overheard the discussion about the dispute between the Kingdom of Almara and the Kingdom of Bashar. If you will allow me a suggestion?" "I'm listening," Youssef said, more out of politeness than actual hope. Over the next 15 minutes, Samira outlined a solution that was simultaneously simple and brilliant. She had identified a fundamental flaw in the advisors' proposals. They all assumed the dispute was about money when it was actually about wounded pride. She suggested an approach that would allow both kingdoms to win publicly while making private concessions. Youssef watched her speak, increasingly and deeply impressed. She knew history, politics, cultural nuances that he himself barely grasped. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had studied deeply, not superficially memorized. When she finished, silence reigned in the office. "It is actually very clever," Rashid admitted grudgingly. "May I?" Samira asked, pointing to the documents on the table. Youssef nodded, fascinated. She approached, took a pen, and began to outline the structure of an agreement that incorporated her suggestions. The way her gloved fingers held the instrument was delicate yet determined. Her handwriting was beautiful, flowing yet perfectly legible. And then something unexpected happened. Leaning over the table to reach a distant document, the sleeve of her dress slipped slightly, revealing a few inches of her wrist. The skin was smooth, tanned, completely normal. No scars, no deformities, just the delicate wrist of a woman. Youssef realized he was staring and quickly forced his eyes up, meeting her gaze. For a fleeting moment, there was humor dancing in those dark eyes. She knew exactly what he had seen, what he had thought. "Thank you for the help, Princess," he said when she finished, trying to sound formal but failing slightly. "It is my duty to help," she replied, but there was something warmer in the tone. "And my pleasure to use the education I received." When she left, Youssef stared at the closed door for a long time. Rashid cleared his throat. "She is impressive, I must admit." "Yes," Youssef nodded slowly. "She is." And for the first time since his forced coronation, he felt something other than resentment toward the arranged marriage. Genuine curiosity about who the woman behind the veil truly was. In the days that followed, Youssef found himself looking for increasingly elaborate excuses to interact with Samira. He asked for her opinion on decisions he would normally make alone, or with advisors. He prolonged the formal dinners that should last an hour into 3-4-hour encounters, with seemingly endless questions about her education, interests, opinions on everything from ancient philosophy to modern architecture, his abandoned field of study that she surprisingly showed knowledge of. And he discovered increasingly fascinating layers beneath the formal surface. Samira was deeply compassionate in ways that went far beyond performative charity. She visited the palace orphanage not just regularly, but daily when possible, working hands-on with the children in practical ways that even the servants commented on admiringly amongst themselves. She didn't just distribute expensive gifts, she sat on the floor with them, told elaborate stories she made up on the spot, helped with lessons, wiped noses and dried tears as if they were her own. She read voraciously and eclectically, classic and contemporary literature, Eastern and Western philosophy, military and social history. She had well-formed opinions on everything, which she expressed eloquently when encouraged. She challenged his assumptions, forced him to consider perspectives he would never have contemplated alone, broadened his intellectual horizons in ways no one else in his life ever had. and she had a subtle, almost invisible sense of humor that gradually emerged as he got to know her better. Dry comments delivered with perfect timing that took him completely by surprise and made him genuinely laugh for the first time in months. Small, ironic observations about the court's pompousness that revealed a sharp intelligence and lack of patience for superficiality. But more than all those admirable qualities, it was definitely her eyes that began to obsess him completely and consumingly. Because he discovered, through intensely focused observation, that he could read almost complete facial expressions just by watching those expressive, almond-shaped eyes. The precise way they narrowed slightly, small wrinkles forming at the corners when she was genuinely amused by something. How they opened dramatically when she was surprised or shocked, her long lashes batting quickly. How they grew soft, almost distant, moist at the edges when she was sad or moved. How they sparkled with sharp, lively intelligence during debates. Small flashes dancing in the dark depths when she made a particularly astute point. Every nuance, every micro-expression became a language he learned obsessively, studying as others studied sacred texts. He began to dream about those eyes every night. He woke up thinking about them before any other conscious thought. He found himself looking for Samira just to see her gaze again, inventing transparent excuses that she certainly recognized but gently indulged. It was a strange, intense, and growing obsession that he didn't fully understand or want to examine too closely. How could he be falling in love so deeply and irrevocably with a woman whose face he had never seen, whose complete appearance remained an absolute mystery? For the essence, rather than the physical form? For the spirit, rather than the outer wrapper? But he was. Slowly but inexorably, deeply and completely, he was falling in love in a way he had never experienced before. Not with Soraya, not with anyone else. He tried to approach romantically on several increasingly less cautious occasions. During a night walk through the magnificently illuminated gardens by colored paper lanterns, he stepped closer physically and emotionally, almost touching her delicate gloved hand, their fingers nearly brushing. She pulled away gently, but decisively and unequivocally. "Princess," he began hoarsely, his voice thicker than he intended. "Your Majesty needs a functional, appropriate queen," she interrupted with a perfectly controlled voice, but he heard a tiny tremor beneath it. "I am simply part of the necessary political agreement. There is no real need to pretend it is more significant than that." The words cut much deeper than they should have, or than she probably intended. "What if I'm not pretending at all?" he challenged softly but firmly. "Then, Your Majesty is confusing closeness forced by circumstance with genuine, freely chosen affection," she replied with an impressive dignity that he respected deeply, even though he hated it at that specific moment. "In 3 weeks, we will be officially married before witnesses. I will perform all the expected duties of a queen without complaint. But please, do not complicate an already inherently difficult situation with unnecessary romantic illusions." She retreated quickly before he could construct a counter-argument, leaving him alone in the fragrant gardens with a growing, painful frustration. Because he had started to genuinely and deeply care. More than care. He had started to love in a way that scared him with its intensity. And she kept him firmly at a deliberate emotional distance, protecting her own heart from the man who had initially treated her with cold calculation and thinly disguised resentment. Could he truly blame her for the protective caution? He had broken the trust even before building it, treating her as a burden rather than a gift. As Youssef struggled intensely with his confused and growing feelings, Soraya relentlessly intensified her venomous campaign of psychological sabotage. She appeared strategically at social events where she knew for certain Samira would be present, making maliciously calculated comments always within earshot, but always with a carefully constructed, plausible deniability if confronted. "It must be so incredibly freeing to have a face literally no one ever judges," she had commented during an elegant reception, her voice sweet and viscous like poisoned honey, her smile perfectly polite but her eyes cold. "Imagine never having to worry even about future wrinkles or age spots when absolutely no one can ever see them. How I envy that freedom." Or during a formal dinner with ambassadors present, "I have such genuine admiration for Princess Samira. It truly takes extraordinary bravery to publicly marry when a person cannot even show their own face. It must be a truly important and significant reason to maintain a secret like that so rigorously. Samira never, ever responded directly to the verbal attacks. She maintained a dignifiably upright posture, ignoring the calculated provocations with an impressive grace that paradoxically made Soraya look increasingly petty, small, and pathetically insecure. But Youssef, observing every nuance obsessively, saw a subtle but unmistakable tension in her shoulders, an almost imperceptible way her gloved hands clenched minimally when Soraya spoke venom. And his hatred for his ex-girlfriend grew exponentially every day, with every comment, with every attack. But the doubts she had planted were persistent. In dark, honest moments, Youssef wondered if there was truth to the rumors. If Samira truly hid something terrible, if he was falling in love with an illusion that would be shattered on the wedding day when the veil finally fell. He tried to push the thoughts away. He repeated to himself that it didn't matter, that he already loved the woman she was inside. But a small, treacherous voice whispered, "What if it does matter when you finally see her?" A week after the confession in the gardens, Youssef began to notice a subtle but undeniable change in Samira. She no longer moved away when he approached. She allowed conversations to stretch into the late hours. She laughed more often at his jokes, and her eyes, those eyes that completely obsessed him, began to soften when she looked at him. During a particularly long dinner, with the full moon illuminating the balcony where they sat, she asked about architecture, the field he had abandoned. "Why did you stop designing?" she questioned, genuinely curious. "The throne left me no choice," he answered bitterly. "But you love it. I see it in your eyes when you talk about bridges and structures." He was surprised. "How do you know?" "Because I observe you as much as you observe me," she admitted softly. And there was something vulnerable in the confession. Youssef felt his heart quicken uncontrollably. "Samira." "Not yet," she interrupted gently. "But maybe." It was hope. Small, but real. In the following days, the tension between them completely changed nature. It was no longer awkward, but charged with possibility. Every accidental brush of their gloved hands sent electricity through both of them. Every prolonged glance promised something neither of them dared to name yet. During a public event, they danced for the first time. Protocol demanded it, but it was not an obligation they felt. It was an opportunity. His hand on her waist, even through layers of fabric, burned. She was initially tense, but gradually relaxed, allowing him to lead her around the floor. "You dance well," she observed. "You do too," he replied. "Although I imagine it's easier when you can see where you step." She chuckled softly. "I developed other compensatory senses." "Such as?" "Touch," she said, and her voice became slightly lower. "I can feel the tension in your shoulders. The way you breathe faster when I am near. How your hand is minimally shaking right now." He pulled her imperceptibly closer. "I am not the only one affected." "No," she whispered, nodding. "I am not." When the music ended, they stood still for a suspended moment, their bodies still close, their breaths mingled. He desperately wanted to kiss her, veil or not, but she pulled away gently, leaving him there with the desire burning. The revelation. 3 weeks before the wedding, an unexpected incident accelerated everything. Samira was alone in the gardens at sunset, when a group of visiting nobles, allies from a distant kingdom, walked past. One of them, visibly drunk, made a loud comment about the mystery bride and what a disappointment the groom must be waiting for. Youssef heard it from a nearby balcony. The rage was instantaneous and visceral. He ran down, arriving just as the drunk man tried to get too close to Samira, clearly intending to see what was hidden. "Take one more step and it will be your last," Youssef roared dangerously, stepping between Samira and the threat. The noble, recognizing the king, paled. "Your Majesty, I did not. Get out of my palace, now. And tell everyone you know. Anyone who disrespects my fiancé disrespects me directly." When the man and the group fled hastily, Youssef turned to Samira. She was trembling slightly. "Are you all right?" he asked urgently, his hands wanting to touch her but hesitating. "Yes," she said, her voice controlled but shaken. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, ever. Protecting you is not a favor, it is—" He stopped, realizing what he was about to say. "It is what?" She pressed gently. "It is a necessity," he admitted rawly. "Like breathing. The thought of anyone hurting you drives me insane." She took a step towards him, closing the distance. "Youssef." For the first time, she touched him willingly. Her gloved hand reached his face, her fingers tracing his jaw with a tenderness that completely shattered him. "I'm starting to believe," she whispered, "that you really love me. Not the idea of me, not the political obligation, but me. It was always you," he swore fervently, covering her hand with his. "From the first moment I saw your eyes, you completely captured me." She leaned closer, so close he felt her warmth through the veil. For one impossible moment, he thought she was going to kiss him like that, but she pulled back at the last second. "Soon," she said softly. "At the wedding. I promise you." And she held his hand for a few more precious seconds before finally letting go. 2 weeks before the wedding, the crisis erupted. Youssef found Samira in the orphan's garden, sitting on the ground without caring about her expensive dress, surrounded by half a dozen small children. She was telling a story in an animated voice, using her hands to dramatize. The children were utterly captivated, their laughter echoing through the garden. And seeing her like that, so naturally maternal and genuinely happy, something squeezed painfully in his chest. He loved her. Completely, irrevocably loved this extraordinary woman. He watched her for long minutes before she noticed his presence. He saw how she hugged a small crying girl, how she wiped another's dirty face with the fabric of her own expensive dress without hesitation, how she kissed the forehead of a shy boy who hid behind her. This was the woman who would be queen. Not just a title, but a truly compassionate leader. When she finally noticed his presence, the story stopped. The children ran excitedly to greet him. He distracted himself with their attention, letting himself be dragged to sit on the ground too. One little girl climbed onto his lap unceremoniously. Another began braiding flowers into his hair. Samira watched with eyes brightened by something that looked dangerously close to adoration. "You're good with them," she commented softly when the children finally scattered to play. "I learned by watching you," he admitted honestly. "You genuinely love them. It's not an act." "They are innocent," she said simply. "They deserve all the love we can give." "You will be an incredible queen," he said with deep conviction. "And you are already a better king than you think," she replied, surprising him. They sat side by side on the ground, expensive clothes forgotten, watching the children play. It was a moment of peace Youssef hadn't experienced in months. "Samira," he began hesitantly, "may I ask something personal?" "Always." Are you afraid of the wedding?" She was silent for a moment. "Yes," she finally admitted, "and no. I am afraid of disappointing, of not being what you expect. But I also long for this, to finally be able to be completely myself with you." "You could never disappoint me," he swore fervently. "You can't promise that without knowing." "But I can," he interrupted gently, "because I already know the important parts. The rest are just details." She turned to face him directly, her eyes shining with emotion. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Make me believe in fairy tales," she whispered. Before he could answer, the sound of voices approaching broke the moment. Youssef stood up quickly, offering her his hand to help her up. When she accepted it, he pulled her gently but firmly, drawing her closer than necessary. For a suspended moment, they stood like that, hands clasped, bodies close, eyes locked. "Can we talk?" he asked low. "In private?" She hesitated only briefly, then nodded. They walked towards the most secluded part of the gardens, their escorts keeping a respectful distance. "Samira," he began, using her first name without a title. "I need to be honest with you. Honesty is always appreciated." "Your Majesty," she replied carefully. "I didn't start well," he admitted, the words pouring out in a rush. "I treated you like an obligation, like a burden, when you deserved respect and consideration. And now I have realized something." "What?" Her voice was cautious. "That I am falling in love with you, not the diplomatic princess. You, the woman who solves problems that frustrate seasoned advisors, who sits on the ground with orphans, who has a dry sense of humor that catches me off guard, who challenges me intellectually in ways no one else does." Absolute silence. Her eyes watched him, impossible to read in that moment. "And most importantly," he continued, his breathing quickened, "I fell in love with your eyes, for the intelligence I see in them, for the compassion, for the strength. You are extraordinary, Samira. And I want a chance to build a real marriage, not just a political agreement." "Your Majesty is being kind," she began. "Youssef," he interrupted. "My name is Youssef, and I am not being kind. I am being honest for the first time in months." She took a step back, her arms crossing defensively. "What if I don't return those feelings?" "Then I will spend my life proving that you should," he answered with conviction. "What if," she continued, her voice trembling slightly, "I am not what you expect, physically?" So she had heard Soraya's rumors. The rage burned. "Look at me," he commanded softly. She reluctantly obeyed. "I fell in love with you without seeing your face. Your eyes were enough. Your mind was enough. Your kindness was enough. What is beneath the veil is just confirmation of what I already know. That you are the most incredible woman I have ever met." "You cannot know that," she whispered. "But I do," he insisted firmly. "And in 2 weeks, when you marry me, I will prove it every day for the rest of our lives." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "Youssef." Before she could answer, an outburst of voices came from the garden entrance. Soraya emerged, clearly looking for him, accompanied by several court ladies who knowingly gossiped. When she saw Youssef and Samira together and relatively isolated, she smiled in a way that froze his blood. "What an adorable scene," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "The Sheikh and his mystery bride. Tell me, Your Majesty, have you ever felt curious about what is hidden beneath that veil?" "Soraya," Youssef warned dangerously. "Because I do," she continued, ignoring the warning. "Everyone does. It's natural, isn't it? To wonder what is being hidden so carefully. It must be something significant." Samira remained motionless, but Youssef saw the tremor in her shoulders. "You will stop now," he commanded in a king's voice, not a former lover's. "Or what?" Soraya challenged, clearly past any pretense. "You can't do anything until the marriage is consumed, and even then, she will always be the one whose face had to be hidden. The disgraced queen." "Enough!" Youssef roared, but Soraya was already moving. In a swift move no one anticipated, she lunged at Samira, her hands reaching for the veil with clear intent to rip it off by force publicly. It all happened in seconds. Youssef moved instinctively, intercepting Soraya, grabbing her wrist with a strength he knew would leave a mark. "Don't you dare!" he hissed. The guards were already moving, but he waved them away sharply, his eyes still fixed on Soraya, who finally seemed to realize the magnitude of her mistake. "Your Majesty, you are banished from the palace," he declared in a voice that echoed through the garden. "Effective immediately. Guards, escort Lady Soraya off the premises. She will not return ever again." "Youssef, please," she tried, panic finally surfacing. "It is Your Majesty," he corrected coldly, "and you lost any right to intimacy when you attempted to violate my fiancé's dignity." As the guards led Soraya away protesting, Youssef turned to Samira. She was frozen in place, her arms wrapped around her body, visibly shaking. Around them, a dozen court ladies and servants watched with wide eyes. The gossip would spread throughout the palace in hours. Youssef made a decision. In front of everyone, without hesitation, he took a step towards Samira. Then, slowly and deliberately, He knelt on the grass in front of her. Collective gasps echoed. A king did not kneel. Never. To anyone. Samira al-Zahir, he said clearly, his voice ringing through the silent garden. You were put in an impossible position. Forced to marry a man who treated you coldly. Subjected to malicious rumors and cruel attacks. And through it all, you maintained a dignity and grace that shame any of us. She was motionless, her eyes fixed on him. I fell in love with the woman behind the veil, he continued. Every word, a public confession. For your intelligence, your kindness, your strength. I fell in love with your eyes before anything else. The way they express everything words cannot. The depth in them, the compassion, the defiance. He took a deep breath. And I want everyone here to know. Even if you were exactly as the malicious rumors suggested, I would choose you 1,000 times over. Because your true beauty is not in the face. It is in your heart, in your mind, in your soul. And those are the parts that I love. Tears began to slide from her eyes, staining the silk of the veil. You are extraordinary, he concluded hoarsely. And it will be an honor to spend my life by your side. If you will accept me not as an obligated sheik, but as a man who genuinely loves you. The silence that followed was absolute. No one dared to breathe. Then Samira extended a trembling gloved hand. Youssef took it, rising and gently pulling her into an embrace that broke all protocols but was absolutely necessary. She sobbed against his chest as applause thundered through the garden. That night, for the first time, Youssef received an invitation to Samira's private apartments. When he walked in nervously, he found her waiting in the sitting room, the veil still in place but her posture less rigid. Thank you, she said simply, for what you did today. You don't have to thank me, he replied. It was the truth. I know, she said softly, and that's why it means so much. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Youssef, she finally said, you can ask the question you've been avoiding. He knew immediately what she was offering. You don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. You defended me without knowing. I deserve the truth. She walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit gardens. There is no deformity, no scars or any horror the rumors suggest. I wear the veil because it is a sacred tradition in my kingdom. Because I believe a man must love a woman for who she is before being influenced by appearance. And because, her voice became softer, I wanted to know if anyone could love me without seeing my face first. And now you know, Youssef said, stepping closer but not touching. Yes, she nodded. Now I know. She turned to face him. At the wedding, I will remove the veil. Not because I am obligated, but because I choose to. Because you have proven that you love the woman inside. The rest is just a bonus. Samira, he said hoarsely, you could be anything, and you would still be the most beautiful woman to me. She chuckled softly through tears. We shall find out soon enough. The days that followed passed in a blur of final preparations. The entire palace was in a frenzy of activity. And for the first time, Youssef allowed himself to genuinely look forward to the wedding instead of dreading it. During the final formal dinner before the ceremony, sitting side by side under the gazes of the entire court, Samira murmured low enough for only him to hear. Don't be disappointed. He took her gloved hand under the table. Impossible. The wedding day dawned clear and warm. Youssef woke with a mix of excitement and nervousness he had never experienced. He would finally see her face. He would finally know. But most importantly, they would finally make vows that both of them chose, not were forced into. The ceremony was grand and opulent as their positions demanded. Hundreds of dignitaries filled the grand hall, cameras capturing every moment for global broadcast. When Samira began walking down the aisle, Youssef forgot to breathe. Even veiled, even covered completely, she was a sight that stole the breath. Proud posture, measured steps, a presence that commanded attention. Her eyes met his across the distance, and he saw what he needed to see. Love, commitment, choice. The cleric began the traditional ceremony, his voice echoing through the sacred venue. Yusef barely heard the words, focused completely on Samira at his side. The vows were exchanged in a firm voice from both of them. It was no longer an obligation, but a chosen promise. "We have reached the moment," the cleric finally announced, "where the bride removes the veil as a symbol of a new life beginning." Yusef saw a brief hesitation in her eyes, then a clear decision. With hands that trembled minimally, Samira reached for the veil. Her gloved fingers found the edge of the silk, and, very slowly, she lifted it. The world completely stopped. She was absolutely stunning. Not in the conventional way that magazines glorified, but in a way that completely stole the soul. Tanned, soft skin, delicate symmetrical features, full lips curved in a nervous smile, high cheekbones, perfectly arched brows over those eyes he already loved deeply. But more than the physical beauty, there was a radiance about her. Genuine happiness, vulnerability, hope. Tears began to stream down Yusef's face without permission or control. He didn't even try to hide them. "You are even more beautiful than I imagined," he whispered, for only her to hear. "But I had already married you in my heart. This is just confirmation that I was right to fall in love." She cried too, her smile widening. The kiss they shared when the cleric declared them husband and wife was passionate, desperate, months of containment and obstacles finally broken. She was warm and real and his, and he would never let go. Applause thundered through the grand hall. 6 months later, on the real first anniversary of their marriage, not ceremony but true relationship, they lay intertwined in their shared bed, a quiet morning before daily duties began. "May I ask something?" Samira said, tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "Always," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "If I really were, as the rumors suggested, if there were scars or deformity, would you have loved me anyway?" Yusef pulled her up to look into her eyes that had started everything, that remained his favorite part. "I fell in love with your eyes the first day I truly met you," he said with absolute conviction. "Everything else was just the icing on the most delicious cake I've ever tasted, but I would have fallen in love either way, because you, Samira, are the most extraordinary woman that exists, and no veil could hide that." She kissed him deeply, gratefully, and lovingly, and he reciprocated, knowing he had received a gift greater than a crown, because he had found his queen not through his choice, but through wise destiny. And sometimes, destiny truly knew better than any human plan.